Welcome to Cut the Bull, an insightful podcast which addresses the news of the day and the cultural issues plaguing our society, bringing logic and context to these topics and discussing solutions too real for mainstream pundits. Now, here are your hosts, Charles Love and Wilfred Riley.
Hello and welcome to Cut the Bull. I am Charles Love alongside my co-host Wilfred Riley. And our guest this week is Shelby Steele, Senior Fellow at the Hoover Institution, Emmy Award-winning documentary filmmaker, author, and overall American treasure. Shelby, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me. Look forward to it.
Well, I invite you on kind of for two reasons, because obviously me and many others love to hear your insights on a lot of the pressing topics of the day. But, you were also kind enough to be the first guest on both of my radio shows. And I realized you haven't been on the podcast yet. And we're like 140 some odd episodes in. So I felt we needed to right a wrong here.
Wow.
So I'm glad
that's a wrong, man. That really
unbelievable how this could have been allowed.
I know, it's a shame on me. I don't know how I sleep at night, but I can sleep at night now. I feel better about knowing that we've done this, and there's a lot to talk about because obviously a lot has changed. I mean, a lot has changed in what 5 months ago I saw you. I think a lot has changed since then.
That's right. Yeah.
I think I want to start with the race issue. Both you're working on a documentary on your White Guilt book. So I want to talk both about why you started writing about race and why white guilt is such a problem.
Okay. So you want me to just dive in?
Yeah. I mean, obviously that had to be something, maybe a situation. I mean, you've been doing it for decades, but something must have triggered the start to kind of focus on race as an issue and why you started to write about it.
I was in the 7th grade and a new book came out, Notes of a Native Son by James Baldwin. And at the time I was the only Black in my class. So I would hide the book. But I read it over and over and over, and I haven't been the same since.
Wow.
It just opened up that you could talk about these things, that you could, find meaning. They could intrigue you, make you wonder about your circumstances and think about yourself as a member of something as big and amorphous as a race, and why there was such a tension, and it just gripped me. And so I went on from there. I read Richard Wright and the Black writers. It was a while before I could understand Ralph Ellison, but when I did get to him in college, I really stayed with him a long time. He was an education.
Wow. I got to ask you a question then, though, before I move on, because it's a really interesting thing, and it kind of plays to how things based on their intentions and how they're presented kind of change. Because you mentioned obviously these very powerful Black writers and how that caught your interest and things of that nature. And so I want to know if you think that if there's anything that's different about it, because if you fast forward today, a lot of what I push back against, some people may watch this interview and say, aha, Charles, even the great Shelby Steele disagrees with you, because there's this larger push in education today to say that obviously there are education gaps. And they say Black kids are failing because there's no teachers that look like them. And there are no books that represent them, that they're interested in, that they can see themselves in. So they're bringing on what they call culturally relevant learning and education. And so what they're saying, in my view, is different from you having access to the books, because I'm not against those books. But what they're saying is Blacks cannot learn unless the math problem, you change the wording in the word problem to something they can relate to, that they can't learn unless the teacher is Black, unless the books are about Black characters. And my argument is that they are singling them out in one way, limiting their ability. They're also in a way saying that they can't learn that way. So the other people, other students, other Black students have learned, and they're limiting what they offer them. So where reading can be like a window to other worlds, to learn about different times and different people, it's almost like they're going to tell the white students that they have access to everything else. And obviously they're still going to read the culturally relevant books, but the Black students are going to be the focus is going to be solely on what they see as their culture, in order to get them to catch up academically. So how is that in any way similar or different to your experience with those books that you mentioned?
Well, this is different as night and day. I almost don't really know where to begin. I mean, that argument is, the nice word is, it's just stupid. Human beings have been learning from reading, and since the beginning of time, it's an argument that people make who are trying to protect a job that they've got through DEI or some other such gimcrack scheme. And it's sad. It's just so sad. They need people like us now to make it clear to them that they have a right to read books by white writers, and who wrote very well and obviously.
Right.
So it is, you almost don't know what to say to something that the motivation, my sense is in the long run, the motivation for people taking that kind of a negative point of view, is that America has come to reward people for victimization, for being victims, not for, particularly Blacks, not for thinking for themselves, not for being their own guiding light, so to speak, but forever deferring to the race and the power alignment that goes along with that. So it makes it clear that there is, that we've built through America's involvement with race, we've built a system that oppresses our students, that in a sense, again, sees Blacks as helpless victims of racism, no matter what they really are in reality. If you're decent, if the institution wants to show its innocence, then we focus again on that victimhood as justifying this whole new direction in education, which is destroying Black students. It's also true, I haven't seen a shred of evidence to suggest that giving Black students books by Black authors means anything at all.
Especially if they already can't read.
If they that may be about it.
Well, Will, what do you say to that, in the sense that I asked that question because I know some would hear him. I'm hearing their voices, and they will say, see, it benefited him. He drew in, but it's like it was different because he didn't have access to it. He had never seen anything before. So he was reading white books. They're trying to replace. Isn't there a difference with how they're applying this?
Well, actually, I have a question for Shelby here, but I mean, I think that the basic point that both you guys have made, I mean, when Shelby said, there are a lot of, and he put this really politely, like, there are a lot of great black writers and there are a lot of whites that wrote very well also. I mean, the history of literature goes back to ancient Akkad or whatever. I mean, there are obviously, Averroes, the Muslim, there are obviously people in every tradition, sons who you should read. So the argument that if you learn to read by reading mostly white people or an integrated mix of people, it's going to make a difference in your reading. I mean, I agree. That's just nonsensical. It's one of those woke things that people say that never gets tested. And it would be really easy to test. I mean, do the children in Afrocentrist academies test better than most other kids? I mean, if you gave black kids exclusively books by black guys for a year, would it improve, annual PISA scores or whatever? The answer is no. But my question for Shelby or for Dr. Steele, like, so I actually wrote down some notes when you were talking, and I mean, so it seems like you had almost the typical kind of black radical experience early on. You were one black
Mhm.
American student in a school full of these white oppressors. You finally found, this is when these were just hard print books. You finally found, one of the stories about Bigger Thomas or something like that. You read the book repeatedly. But I mean, today you seem to be kind of a center right guy who doesn't have a lot of patience for a lot of what's going on in education and African American education. So, kind of what led you to the sort of, to me, very just coherent positions that you have? I mean, what prevented, 20 years of radicalism? Like, so you read books by black authors, and then you went on and read books by white authors. What led you to just normalcy?
Well, it's right to say that I went on reading. I read writers. The truth is, my exposure to Baldwin excited me about reading and transformed my whole attitude toward it. I was kind of an alienated kid. This gave me an intimacy with someone else's mind who was really thinking about things and telling stories that were interesting, and that if I didn't bother me in the slightest that the characters were all white. There were great stories, and Chip Hilton and the series on sports and so forth. I love that stuff. I think most kids would, unless they're prompted otherwise. So again, now in retrospect, as time went on and we moved deeper into the 60s and the civil rights legislation was passed and we moved into this Black Power movement. I was much infatuated with that at the time. Thought that made Malcolm X was my man, and I thought he made eminent sense. And but even then, I read white writers. I would sneak in. I fell in love with people like Saul Bellow, John Updike. Um, any number of other writers who were just good writers and told great stories, and I always knew, and I came from a family that reinforced this. I always knew that anytime you interject race into any sort of a problem, you are injecting a poison. It will be destructive. It will diminish you. It will uh, hurt you in some profound spiritual way if you ignore them. And so I sort of secretly, even against my own will,
Hmm.
would try to read writers that of from all backgrounds, and I'm glad I did.
Yeah, and just very quickly, one thing you said there I think is really interesting. When you're talking about reading the great black authors, you said that the great black authors got you interested in reading, not into specifically black issues, which
Right.
I think is just sort of an important point. Like, if you leave people up to their own devices, they'll mostly do things that make sense. So if you read a book by a black guy that's really motivational, you'll say that's a really motivational book, and then read a book by a black guy or a white guy with the same sort of themes in it, manhood, coming to adulthood, that sort of thing. I
Mhm.
think that when you say you have to be kind of directed, that what you're supposed to pick up from that is that you like black people a lot. That's what you're seeing a lot of in the schools. So you're kind of guiding what people are going to figure out on their own. And that's a very common theme in modern society, where just normal behavior is presented as sort of pathological. So that's interesting.
Right, right. And the same goes for you mentioned topical. If you give kids something that they like, they'll be more likely to read it. And then in that case, if they happen to be drawn to authors that are black, then that's fine because they're not being drawn to them because they're black. But when you take it, I mean, I had a teacher just give my son was coming on with all these black books, and I thought it was his choice, which is fine. He was like, no, the teacher's giving them to me. So this was her way of saying, as a white teacher, that he needs to understand the culture. And I'm white, so I don't really know. So let's just give him a bunch of books about black people or by black people. So, but he didn't take to it because I guess he wasn't really interested in the people that he got the books about. So
That's
Well,
probably because his
that's
interest is something specific like baseball that black people and white people both write about. So if
right,
he got 15 books on baseball, I'm sure he'd be absolutely fascinated by
right,
them.
right,
yeah,
yeah,
yeah, absolutely. That this subject of conversation would come up and be interesting is in itself interesting because these are just such obvious points,
Yep, absolutely.
just so painfully obvious. I wonder how many sort of revolutions of meaning do we have to go through to get back to where we began. A good book is a good book. And it didn't bother me that they use the N word in Tom Sawyer.
hmm
Didn't bother me at all. Uh, I was a grown man, and literature sort of my profession. I see what point they were trying to make, but as always, when administrative people and institutions start to get into this territory, they invariably mess it up. And again, better left. My philosophy of life, better left alone.
right, right. And speaking of this, so there's obviously been this hyper focus on race, and I mean, we all would agree that it's clear that it's not helping. The jury's out on some others, but why does it continue, or in some ways, seem like it's getting stronger? And why are any attempts to just point out flaws, like both of you just said, some of these things are just so common sense and so logical and obvious, but pointing them out, not only do they kind of attack you, but you're met with people either denying the problem or saying that it's racist to point out the problem. So why do you think that is?
They're looking for racism. Racism is the beautiful, wonderful avoidance
Mm,
that many blacks have indulged in now for going on 70 years. Um, so we keep going back to race. We're going to get something out of this puppy. We're going to milk it in some way. We're going to get a job out of it, a career out of it, an advantage here. We're going to milk it if possible. That, in a sense, is why we stay stuck there. Would it end the world if some black kid got to be 21 and never read a book by a black writer? No, if he was reading Shakespeare and Dostoevsky and any number of others, he'd be fine.
yep.
And I those are great writers. You learn a lot from the idea that I would let race guide one's writing is what is it? It's pernicious.
Right. Right.
Well,
Um,
this is all just very briefly. This is all part of a bigger trend that I see. I see a lot, saw a lot when I was an academic executive that I still see just in the world around me, which is the idea that you can't do anything without an expert to guide you, sort of.
mm,
So there's this whole cadre of people that are monitoring normal behavior and describing it as problematic or whatever the case might be. Like I grew up a decade or two later, but I mean in a very similar situation where my mom was herself pretty well educated. But I mean, she was a substitute teacher at the time. We were kind of hard scrabble. And like when I read books, they were just books I bought in the thrift store. And I found out years later, a bunch of them were supposed to be wildly inappropriate, like Rudyard Kipling and war stories about people killing each other and so on down the line. But I mean, looking back at that, there were very few things I picked up from that that were negative at all. I remember that until college, I used to use the term he just generically to refer to everyone when I wrote, because that was the standard until about 30 years ago. I still use it very often. But they were all things at that level where for someone to really describe this as a problem, you'd have to have a lot invested in there being a lot of problems. So you come up with these terms like microaggressions. I think I mentioned problematic to describe them. The reality is that we're all kind of, I mean, we're sort of saying the same things here because this is extremely obvious. Like, of course, if you're a black dude and your hero for part of your life is white, that's not going to affect you at all. Like none of this. Like if you read books by black elite authors as opposed to white elite authors, it's going to have a 1% effect on your test score. None of this actually matters. We're just lucky enough to be in a phase of life where there aren't that many real challenges. And so people can spend a lot of time trying to grift based on this sort of thing. Like as a black person, I'm 1% more disadvantaged than you. To me, it's just an annoying phenomenon of society, perhaps because I didn't begin life wealthy. A lot of these people just strike me as parasites. But I mean, once you understand the path of behavior there, it's pretty comprehensible. It's just useless.
But isn't part of the problem that that's the academic angle, which is true, the leaders, the politicians, the people who are making money off of it, the DEI people, all that part is true. But there's a reaction to it that goes beyond that, right? We saw it after George Floyd. Shelby talked about it in the documentary on Bensonhurst, how people I kind of Matt Shelby talks about it as people using race as a mask. I kind of look at it as a twisted version of Munchausen by proxy, right? So you got in Munchausen, obviously you got the person who's pretending that someone else is sick so they can care for them. Here, you got people who are taking some, like Will's book, saying that they're hate crime hoaxes, where some things that aren't racist, but in a lot of cases, some of the situations really are racist. But these people are taking it on themselves as if this thing happened to them. And they're saying, look at what they did to me. Look at what they did to us. I must do this. That's literally the whole George Floyd thing. We need to shut the country down because of what they did to me and what they constantly do to us every day. And I, just being as blunt as I'm like, really? They shoot you every day? Really? Every day you're getting shot? You are getting shot. So I get the point about the DEI, the academia, and all of that. But what makes regular people, Shelby, say, yeah, this is what's happening? So they live their day and their lives, going through their life, everything's fine. Something happens to a guy in San Francisco and they're in Georgia and they're just all up in arms. They can't function because look at what they're doing to us. Why are they taking on this as a personal affront? Every supposed racial situation.
Well, I think because this is, again, and race is a perfect avoidance. It breaks my heart to listen to people like the ones you're describing talk, because it's as though they want to literally drape young black kids and young black men and women of whatever age, to sort of drape them in victimization, because they're in a sense saying to them, you're only worth something to me as a victim. The minute you say you're not a victim, you're not black, as Mr. Biden would no doubt put it. And so it's that's the sacred sort of screw that has to turn, is that you have to present yourself in this world as a victim, dress as a victim, speak as a victim, act as a victim, and that will be your ticket to ride in America. And for many, it has been that. It's worked out that way. Right. That's the worst thing in the world that could happen to a people who are coming out of 4 centuries of honest to God, real oppression. But yet we come out of that oppression in a society that's guilty over what is history did. And we can dress this up in all sorts of ways, but guilt is a loss of moral authority. You're guilty. You can't, you don't have the power anymore to be fully in charge of your life. And so you give that agency, that power, over to the people who have historically undermined you. And then there you are again, a poor black, you know what? who can't keep a job, who can't raise his own kids, who can't, on and on and on. And we as a people have used this and used race as a way to escape the challenges that freedom give us. Our enemy is freedom, not racism. Racism's been gone. You can't find it. Freedom is smothers us because no one is helping us. And my own personal point of feeling is no one ever will help us. We won't ever be lifted from our past by other people, by their goodwill. And no, they got another set of problems that are theirs, but it's not going to lift us up. But in this sort of halting way that we're progressing in American life, we're not getting anywhere. We're sinking further behind. You turn on the evening news, and snatch and grab is the order of today. My goodness, the Black community I grew up in, if you did something, we weren't like that.
Right.
This is the result of some sort of systemic use of race constantly to excuse inappropriate behavior.
Will, can I ask
shut
you?
up there.
Will,
Sure.
he said something that makes me reminds me of something that's probably one of the more toxic ways that people approach this. Now, Shelby lived it. You can talk about his story. You can talk about how he was born. You can talk about, the swim team and the racism he felt. He never denied it. Earlier, he specifically said that there was historic oppression and racism in 400 years and all this stuff. But the moment he says something that makes it clear that today we're not living in that, he becomes a denier, right? So then they accused him of denying racism, denying the history, denying the past, speaking for whites, and now no one will listen to him because he's just dismissing, even though he literally said it. So isn't that part of the, I know it's intentional, that's a really, use your word, problematic way that they're approaching this, right? Because it's a way to discount what he's saying, but what he said is so crystal clear, but that's one of the ways it's attacked.
Yeah, so this is a point. Like, I don't think any of us, we've all published academic or high-end public intellectual writing. I don't think any of us denies that racism exists on Earth. Look at the Yugoslavian or Rwandan conflict, or that it existed to a pretty high level in the USA. We had close to a caste system in the South. No one denies that, which I guess is the point. So, the logical gambit that you're talking about is just, it's a conversational strategy, right? Like, if someone as eloquent as Shelby is going to make the point, like, okay, this happened, but it hasn't for 60 years, stop your bullshit. Someone's going to cut you off before it hasn't for 60 years, stop your bullshit, by saying that you're deflecting from reality, or that any denial of racism is the denial of genocide or something like that. I'm not saying this especially well, but we've all seen the technique. Right. I think that one thing that he said that's very interesting, though, is this idea that the problem now is not racism, the problem is freedom. And I've read all of your books, and this is a theme that runs through white guilt and so on, that Black people for a very long time were oppressed. This is not unique to Black people. Women were, I'd argue, Irishmen, Native Americans, many are still living on reservations, but Black people certainly were. We don't deny that, right? And this whole structure of organizations, the NAACP, Jesse, Brother Al, all these people, are about 50 different groups, evolved to combat actual oppression. If you look at where in Chicago the Black Gangster Disciples came from, even that was tied into this. And when oppression ends, which it pretty much has, we desegregated even the Deep South in 1954, at least legally. Civil Rights Act in 1964, pro-minority affirmative action for 60 years. When that ends, you're left with this existential crisis because you're being asked to do this very scary thing, which is compete with everyone else equally with no real shackles on you or the other man. So you can either just go do that. I think Asian Americans did a pretty good job of this. Or like many African Americans and like a fair number of poor whites down here in Appalachia, natives, you can say, no, nothing's changed. And you can just kind of keep the same system going. I mean, it really is what we're doing now. I mean, like Black Lives Matter, people will very openly say, we're continuing the work of the civil rights movement. We're the new fundraisers on civil rights. We actually just redid the March on Frankfurt down here in Kentucky. If you guys remember that from the civil rights era, King came down here. I
Right.
mean, there were thousands of people walking across the bridges. People were crying, they had signs out and all this. And to me, I thought about going just as I'm pretty pro-black. I'm a black man, a little on the right, but people would, welcome me to the barbecue. But it just didn't make sense because the war's over. So, I mean, I guess I actually have a question for you if Charles doesn't have one, which is how can the black community get past this and into competing under conditions of freedom? I think that's the big question for the black community right now. But I like, well, the pattern you're describing, yeah, it's the question of, okay, that have you guys ever had like a shelter dog?
Mm-mm.
Mm-hmm.
Shelby,
Yep.
did you experience what I did when you try to let it out of kind of the crate and it just won't go?
Yep.
Like you're not abusing it anymore. No one's ever going to abuse it again. You try to put it in a beautiful backyard. It just sits on an ass and won't do anything. This usually lasts about 3 weeks. I'm not, trying to compare blacks or Appalachians or whatever to shelter puppies. But I mean, like, it's the same thing. Like the war's over. Okay. The last round went to us. But now what do you do? And that's the question. So I'll actually pose the question to Shelby and to both of you gentlemen. Would make the black community adjust to freedom? How do you get past the civil rights era stuff?
Well, the quick answer, I think, is that suffering is what will probably have to come into the pit. We will try so many, as we are now with this DEI stuff, trying so many gimcrack, silly, on their face ideas of how to educate minority children and so forth, and because as you just said, it's so obvious that there's just money and it's I'm thrown freedom has thrown me into competition with other people, white, black, and otherwise. But I'm scared to death. The more scared I am, the more I'm going to I'm going to claim victimization. It's my first weapon against the fear, the existential fear of freedom. If I say there's freedom, my God, look at the accountability that puts on me and to my own self. And do I care about myself enough to take charge of myself and make decisions and follow up on them and learn by trial and error how to, limp through life as most of us do. I haven't seen anybody with sort of beat that progression where they're, in other words, the whole focus on race is a distraction that wastes our time, and that we will continue to fail. We will become, I think, a hardcore underclass. We're at risk of becoming a hardcore underclass of human beings strung out on drugs, broken families. No, none of the sort of models that where a successful life can be led. None of them thrive, and instead we glamorize our life down here on the bottom. And it breaks my we don't like middle class blacks. We don't like academic. We don't on and on. We've got such, you can see it in the music. You can hear it. A terror of the future. No realistic sense of what it takes to move ahead in freedom. And those members of those blacks who are focused with that, who I count as the quote black conservatives, are all isolated, and we will continue to be isolated, I think, because we appear to be slow learners where freedom is concerned, and we just keep hesitating to dive into the water, and we keep saying, well, you got to admit there's some racism somewhere. Well, how pathetic can you get? There's poisoning all over the place, all kind of negative things in this life. And that industry, that civil rights industry that you just mentioned, lead the way in convincing us that we are victims, that we're not doing well because we're victims of racism. And that's the horrible trap that we're in. And we've got ourselves completely tied up. No longer has anything in the world to do with white people. White
That's
people
what I
done
was going to say.
relatively good.
That's what I was going to say. The thing he said, "What do you do?" I'm like, stop focusing on whites and waiting for them to change.
My answer to what should you do? One word: algebra.
Calculus. Yeah, no, that's hilarious.
There you go.
Literate. But they're
Algebra.
There
that's probably
You move ahead in life.
you go.
Get good at algebra.
Mhm. What were you going to say, Will?
one word answer I've heard on the show. I mean, yeah, there's an interesting line that kind of comes from that actually. Like when you said black conservatives are kind of isolated as they fight against this trend, that's actually a good definition of a black conservative. Just someone who recognizes that the old conflicts are over and freedom exists and has for some time. Other than that, it's hard to find a coherent thing that unifies like John McWhorter and Glenn Lowry and
Right.
Thomas Sowell and Armstrong Williams and so on down the line. And us,
That's true,
Charles
because it's
Love.
not political. That's true.
Yeah, these guys are well-known representatives of both parties. And Byron Donalds. I mean, so what is that unifier there? It's simply the idea that Black Americans, we might be a little behind on the tests, but I mean, we're doing pretty well athletically, socially. Obviously, we should focus more in school, but it's a roughly equal competition. If you recognize that Asian Americans are laughing everyone, in fact, if you recognize that and you're prepared to compete and you want to teach your kids how to perform at a reasonable level academically and the rest of it, you would probably in most conversations be considered a black conservative. So that's an interesting definition. The real question is how to get past the mass of people who continue insisting that the issue is the continuation of racism. I think you gave a good explanation of how to do that, but it really is startling.
Yeah.
I mean, it's like the lights being turned on 50 years ago and a huge mass of people sitting around with their eyes closed, insisting that the problem is darkness. Like that's really not the case. Like guys come here from I mean, all three of these are great human civilizations. What are frankly third world countries? I mean, Nigeria, Ethiopia, Vietnam, all three of those groups dramatically outperform the white and black norm in most states. So what are they doing? Well, they're working. They're going to school. They don't have magic power. They don't have actual juju. So yeah, the sooner that gets picked up, the better.
Apparently, they're doing algebra.
They're doing algebra.
Well, the Nigerians are going well past that. They're doing.
I did not want to do algebra in high school, but I had to do it anyway.
There you go. I want to shift to another thing. Obviously, we've seen a rise in anti-Semitism, and you talk about that sometimes. And I know I speak to some of my friends, and what's odd to me is some people outside of a group, just like any, same thing when we talk about race relations. If you're outside the group, you see a little bit of it, but you don't really see how it works or how bad it is. And one glaring thing that I was told is I have friends who are in their 30s and 40s, and some who were born here, some who immigrated here 6, 7, 8, 9 years old. And they're telling me that they're experiencing stuff today in 2024 at 30 and 40 that they never had to do in their childhood. So obviously there's something, that, sparked people to be open about this, whether it's social media, October 7th. But one thing I thought, and I want to get your opinion on, is we talk about all this stuff, DEI and the cultural shift. My thought is, and I want to know if you agree, that approach, even though it's mostly focused on Black Americans, that dichotomy between an oppressor and the oppressed, that everybody pick a side, let's be hyper focused on our differences, kind of softened the ground for anti-Semitism. What do you think about that?
Say the last part again. I'm not.
That the fact that people were making it so easy and comfortable to focus on differences and to put people in boxes, made it easy for those people to, put Jews in a box, right?
It made it inevitable that Jews would be in a box, and Jews also carry the burden of being extremely successful. And I think anti-Semitism is born out of envy. Uh, they just thrive. They've been their oppression is unquestioned. No one questions seriously the Holocaust.
Mhm.
Um, but boy, they make us, they put us in touch with a sense of inadequacy because they had a rough struggle with freedom too, but they faced up to it. They did their algebra. And so that's what, that's what it is for someday. I pray, I just pray someday we will, um, there will come such a day. We will get past this. I love, it excites me to see, I'm not that political either, on a personal level, but it excites me to see blacks opening their minds to the Republican Party for one thing recently here.
Mhm.
Wow, that's a sign of race fatigue. They're exhausted with being victims, just exhausted, and it doesn't help them deal with the problems that their lives really have to deal with. And so they actually open the other ear to what is to the right, to what's being said there. And one by one by one, I begin to see a certain softening of this victim-focused identity,
Right.
a softening of it. And we got a long way to go,
Right.
because racism was so nice, so sweet, would give you it would give you grandeur
Hmm.
in your alienation, and you could just go through life doing nothing and feel pretty damn good about yourself, and blame all the struggles on the white man, and whilst you were sinking. Well, we're getting past that, I think. At least I hope we are.
I'm going to let Will ask if he has another question, the final question, but I do want to ask you one quick thing. In thinking about the film 7 Days in Bensonhurst, I'm wondering if you ever kind of gone back and taken a glance at the neighborhood like you did in the What Killed Michael Brown, kind of looking back afterwards when the cameras went away. Because one thing I noticed that's interesting about it is because this neighborhood in 1990 was majority white. If you notice that now it's like 51% Asian and Hispanic, and it's like 20% um only 30% white now. So like the demographics of the neighborhood has changed drastically since then.
Yeah, yeah. Well, um, that's a good thing. People move on. Uh,
They haven't gotten many blacks yet. It's still less than 5%, but it is in majority minority now.
yeah. Well, I probably would not mind sending my kids to school there
That is a
now.
big difference. Will,
Uh,
any last final thoughts from you?
I guess one question that ties into some of the things that we've already asked before. One of the things that Shelby said that I wrote down just in passing is that in the Black community, there's this idea that like the least successful person is the most authentic Black person. And that's actually something that and I think this is a real thing, and it's something that I don't see in other communities. So, like the other day on Twitter, I posted a picture of the BLM rioters that were arrested in Portland. And something a lot of people don't know, like white crime, less so for murder, but has also been skyrocketing lately. And like the BLM rioters were like 70% white. And I
Mhm.
wasn't trying to make fun of blacks or, well, this is true nationally. I wasn't really trying to make fun of blacks or whites, but I said, never forget the people burning down black businesses were mostly Caucasian and they looked like this. And I posted the actual mugshots from Portland. It was like white guys with bones through their ear. Like, I mean,
Colored
just it was
hair,
exactly
girls
what
with
you'd
colored
expect.
hair.
Like it was the young savages on the other side. And the thing is, everyone was like, yeah, that's true. Like, I don't question your data. But all the white guys in the comments were like, yeah, lock them up. Yeah, we're still responsible for like 55% of the crime. Yeah, throw them in jail. Toss away the key, get rid of them. We don't need these bums. They make the brand look bad.
yeah.
In the black community, you often see kind of the opposite with, I mean, you rap sexy red, all that kind of thing. What can what can normal black people, especially black men, do to move this away from this? Like, how do you convince people that failing isn't authentically black?
Well, boy, I've been asking that question for a long time. Um, I don't think there's any tricks or devices or systemic maneuverings that we can rely on to do that. I my sense is, for me personally, I keep a faith. I have faith that we will overcome, that we will. I mean, it's no joke to go through 4 centuries of the most horrendous oppression conceivable. It's going to take some time. And I see these as different stages in the span of my own lifetime. I see 4 or 5 big, serious movements, changes in direction in Black America. And I think that we're just beginning. It's the old cliche, the pendulum swinging this way and swinging that way. I think it's going to happen as people get frustrated, as they understand that they are in charge of their own fate. Their life is going to be the result of their decisions, and not those of some racist somewhere. They're going to keep looking around for racism because it's been so nice and easy. No amount of failure is too much for racism to laud. But that's gone. We're going to become an embarrassed people in the near future, I think. And that will be good, because we're evolving, and we will evolve to the point where we're ready to actually go into competition with whites and Asians and others, and compete on equal terms. So look at what we did in sports. Look at what we've done in music. I take these as wonderful signs of reasons to keep the faith. And as we get into the business world more, as we get and so forth and so on, I think the same thing will happen. We'll get tired of being at the bottom, and so Johnny Smith over there will take his life in his own hands, and will maybe stay married and raise his children, and so forth and so on. And one by one, over time, we'll move forward. Will a civil rights group do that? Maybe, but my sense is that individual Blacks are going to do their algebra.
All right. Well, I think that's a great place to leave it. He is Shelby Steele, Senior Fellow at the Hoover Institution, documentary filmmaker, author, and it's been great to have you on, Shelby. Thank you for joining us.
Well, thanks so much for having me. Good to be with you.
God bless the US of A, land of the free and a home of the brave. God get all of the praise. I got a country to save, cause I'm Patriot J and I'm saving a day.